definitive 365 cut. These are the meaningless ramblings of a Scottish redone whore and a pissy ex-video store clerk. Their ongoing mission is to set right the movie wrongs. They're gonna need a bigger podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to the 365 Flicks podcast. My name is Kevin Halden, I'm the pissy ex-video store clerk, and I am back again by myself for another indie talk. These indie talks are coming thick and fast. I guess with the lockdown and everything, people have got more time to sit down and chat really and talk about the projects and have a discussion about things, I guess, because we're all living in some unprecedented times. I mean, things are kind of getting a little bit back to normal here in the UK. We're going to start going back to work and seeing what work looks like now. But for now, I'm still going to bring you some awesome indie talks, and I'm going to endeavour, when things start going back to real life, I will endeavour to bring you more. We are the 365 Flicks podcast. You can find us on iTunes, you can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, the Libsyn app. You can find us pretty much anywhere that you get your podcasts. They call them catching apps. That's what they call them, apparently. It would be great if you like what we do, especially with these indie talks. It would be fantastic if you gave us a cheeky little rating and review. It's always nice. It helps the algorithms, I guess, and it means more people can find us. It helps the indie talks, really, because the guys that are coming on, we're trying to push them, we're trying to pimp them out a little bit more. A lot of these guys, especially our guests today, don't really need much of our help, but it's always awesome to have them on and talk and just try and let people know about their projects. This one's super interesting, by the way, but we'll get to that in a quick hot minute. You can also find us on our social medias, the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram at 365FlicksPod. That's where you will find us. Hit us up, give us a shout, like the pages, give us a shout, give us recommendations for movies or TV shows that we can watch on the main show, or if you know somebody in the film industry that you think would like to come on and have a bit of a chat and has something to say, give us a shout, put them our way. It's what we're all about, you know. We don't just do films either. We've had musicians on, we've had comic book creators on, we've had people who play games for a living on this show. We've had different improv comedy, for Christ's sakes. I mean, we're not very funny, but the guys we had on were. So we're open. We're indie talk, and if it's independent, we want to know. Mostly movies, mostly TV, but we're all good. We're all good. This episode today, though, oh my Christ, Jude Poyer. Gangs of London came out a little while ago. I absolutely adored Gangs of London. You would have heard us do a proper little review on the main show. For the most part, both me and Chris absolutely enjoyed the show. But one thing that we both wholeheartedly agreed on was that the action in this show was just incredible. The hypersensitive realisticness of this show. I mean, it's Gareth Evans. If you've seen The Raid, if you've seen Raid 2, you know what you're getting in for with Gareth Evans. He's an absolute visual masterpiece. Visionary even, sorry. But I reached out to Spencer Collins, who was on the last indie talk that I put out there on last Friday. And Spencer worked on the show as a military advisor, so I got in touch with him and I was kind of like, dude, I would love to have you come back on the show properly, because we had an interview that kind of fell by the wayside a while back, mostly because I would love to actually chat with you about what you did on Gangs of London. To which he responded, yeah, happy to do so, would love to. But there's another guy. There is Jude Poyer, who worked on the show alongside Gareth Evans. Really kind of work very closely together. This is a guy you want to reach out to and you want to speak to, because if anybody can give you insight on this show, it's this man. So I reached out to Jude, and he totally answered. He got back to me. He was up for doing so. He couldn't wait to have a bit of chat with me. It was fantastic. Just even like a guy at this level, and a guy behind the camera, behind the scenes, doing the stunt choreography and the coordination and things like that. it's awesome to have these guys on, but it's also awesome to have guys who are, clearly head and shoulders above the rest in their field. Jude is an awesome guy to speak to. He's worked on some fantastic projects. I'll run through a couple. I kind of do in the interview, but I'll run through a couple. So obviously Gangs of London. He did a little bit of work on Ip Man 4. If you've seen the Ip Man franchise, you know how incredible they are. So he did a little bit of work on that with Donnie Yen. Fantastic. Killers Anonymous with Gary Oldman and Tommy Flanagan from Sons of Anarchy. He did a little bit on that, so that's cool. The Apostle, again, another Gareth Evans. That was the Netflix movie that he did after the Raid 1 and 2. A little bit different to what he normally does, but fantastic movie. A Private War, Final Score. You'll remember I spoke to Craig Conway a little while back. I interviewed Craig Conway and we talked about Final Score because he was in that. Craig Conway's awesome. Please do check out more of his work. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and find it. Netflix again, The Titan. He also did Netflix's... what was it called again? Sorry. My Sandcastle, the one with Henry Cavill. It was a war movie. Fantastic movie. I absolutely adored that. Transformers The Last Night, did some work on that. Sandcastle, as I've just mentioned. Free Fire. Remember Free Fire with Cillian Murphy, Sam Riley? That a really good cast that did. It was absolutely fantastic film. I really enjoyed that one. Brothers Grimsby, the Sacha Baron Cohen movie. Going all the way back, the man has been in the industry since the late 90s, working with the likes of your Jet Lis, your Jackie Chans, your Sammo Hungs. Yeah, because as you'll find out in the interview, that he moved over to Hong Kong for a bit and did some work over there, and that's kind of where he cut his teeth and earned his craft. So we're going to get into the Jude Poyer interview in literally 2 minutes. First of all, though, I want to give a massive, huge shout out to Tom Payton, director extraordinaire. We love Tom Payton. We've been pushing his work since the day we started podcasting, basically. And he released The Ascent, which you will have heard of us talk about, formerly known as Stairs. I think we've interviewed just about everybody from that movie. That's why Spencer came on Friday to talk about that as well. It has premiered. It has come out. You can get it on the likes of Amazon, birdbox.com, all those awesome streaming sites. Sky, it's on the Sky app now. You can get it on there. But it had a premiere on Friday night, and of course with COVID and everything, and the lockdown and the quarantine, cinemas being shut, they took to virtual reality to release the movie. I bought myself an Oculus headset so that I could join in, see what it's all about. It was dope as shit. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I just want to let people know that it's out there. I will be talking about the VR experience on the main show. I can't wait to just dive into that and let people know what it was like. That was different, but massive props to Tom Payton and the rest of the team for The Ascent coming out. It's going gangbusters from what I can tell. It's getting some really good reviews and everybody seems to be happy with it. I'm not surprised. The movie's fantastic. Anyway, Jude Poyer, we're going to get into this. I will warn you, you may notice from the runtime, this is it's about a cool hour and 50-minute interview with Jude. We really went in and we did a good service to his career, and I'm really proud of this interview, which is why when it came to editing and cutting things down, I kind of struggled taking things out, because the man he's really intriguing and really interesting to know, and a lot of the stuff he tells us is just awesome. So it's pretty much been left untouched. He may regret that, but yeah, please do sit through the entire thing. There's some fantastic stories in here and a really good insight into how stunt choreographers work. So with that, I'm gonna let the interview go. And yeah, I'll be back on the other side to let you know what we've got coming up.
Greetings from Tromaville. I'm Lloyd Kaufman, president of Troma Entertainment and creator of The Toxic Avenger. You know, folks, when the Troma team and I are not making those great movies like Tromeo and Juliet and Terra Firma and Return to Nukem High, a.k.a. Volume 2, the Troma team and I like to kick back and inhale the most educational and entertaining podcast in the world, poop culture.
Hello, I'm Toxie. Toxie, I love poop culture. Poop culture is the best. I like poop culture. In fact, I even look like some poop right now. If you look closely, it's kind of a poop.
But I'm 70 years old and I want to blow my fucking brains out. So, honestly, I don't even know why I care.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The distinct pleasure of speaking to Jude Poyer. Jude is a London-born stuntman / choreographer, stunt double, actor, all-round kick-ass badass. In no less than the IMDb would state roughly about 130 projects on the big and small screen, which is mental. Spanning about 25 years of a career this man has, averaging about 6 to 7 movies per year, which I don't know how anybody has the time for that, but that is awesome. Everything from big budget to low budget, short movies, foreign language flicks, and event TV. A quick list of projects that I cherry-picked out from so many was the likes of Ip Man 4, which just recently came out, Final Score, Transformers, The Last Night, Brothers Grimsby, the Sacha Baron Cohen movie that came out a couple of years ago, Free Fire, Kingsman, Secret Service, the Total Recall remake, Netflix movies like Sandcastle and The Titan, and then obviously some low-budget fare Brit flicks, the Rise of the Foot Soldier 2 and 3, and Plan B's Ill Manners. Most recently, you would have seen, and I saw quite a bit of work on, Jude did some work on the Gareth Evans TV show Gangs of London, a TV show that we have a friend of the show, and he's spoken to us a couple of times. He worked on the show as well as a military advisor, Mr. Spencer Collins. So I got in touch with Spencer, and I was speaking to him about other guys on the project, and he told me to get in touch with Jude. Said if I was wanting to speak to anybody with any massive, amazing experience, you were the guy that I should get in touch with. So Jude, how are you today? How are you keeping?
I'm really good, thank you.
And I'm sorry that took so long.
Okay.
People will just be like, yeah, he doesn't normally do that, but this is very, very different for our show. We our main show is where Chris and I just shoot the shit about movies that we love, TV shows and everything like that, news, reviews and all that kind of thing. Our other show, the spin-off show that we have, is where we like to speak to people within the industry, but we've never actually had a stuntman yet. And that didn't actually dawn on me until Spencer kind of mentioned it. So it was like, right, let's get Jude on, let's talk stunts, let's talk choreography. And then, of course, I went to your IMDb and your wiki, and it turns out you've worked on just about everything. You've worked just about everywhere, and you've worked just about with everybody. So this will be an interesting one for people. First of all, I'm going to start with just a cheeky little icebreaker. I've been asking everybody the same sort of question right about now, because we are in a very, very unprecedented time, and movies and TVs, every industry's been hit, but movie and TV has been hit pretty harsh by this as well. So I guess I just wanted to know how you've been keeping during the lockdown, and how it's sort of affecting your career right now, sort of current events.
Well, as with, I think, most people who work on film crews and on film sets, the work stops. Yeah. I think if you're a producer, if you're a writer, they can carry on working to a certain extent. But no, my work just completely froze up just when the lockdown was ordered by the government. Yeah. I was due to work on quite a small movie that was a musical heist film, and I was actually really looking forward to it. It had a nice script, good cast, good director, and I'd done the recce's, I'd done meetings, fight rehearsal, and then they, on the end of their first day of shooting, I wasn't required that day. I was actually working on a music video, and I got a message from the line producer saying we've had to wrap.
Jeez.
And then hopefully that movie will resume at some point, but that's just the reality.
Yeah.
And so the last thing I did was a music promo. And then Gareth Evans' next project, which is a film called Havoc, we've done about, I think, 12 weeks of action design and choreography for that, and we were planning to do more, but that's obviously been put on hold for the time being.
It's a madness. It's an absolute madness. It's we have spoken to a couple of people in the last couple of months that have been pretty lucky. Like either the movie had just kind of finished, or like you say, it's writers and producers who they can carry on working. But it's interesting because we've not had someone like yourself whose your work is pretty imperative to be on set and to be around these guys, and it's kind of like, yeah, it does completely stop, and you don't really think about that kind of the backroom guys. It's
I mean, I guess it's the same for makeup artists, costume people, camera teams. You know, if your job involves being on set and getting things done, in most cases it's dried up. I think some people are getting back to work now with TV commercials and things like that, but I get the sense that the water's being tested, so that they're shooting with very small crews under very, very specific sets of circumstances and protocols. And I don't think those protocols, realistically, you can't make an action TV show with the current protocols.
Yeah,
I think it'll be interesting.
That was going to be the next question, because life is going to be, for the time being, and we don't know how long, but life is going to be very different on the other side of this. And I wondered how your job, your role is very, I'm imagining, close-knit groups and sort of working together in very close proximity. So how do you feel like your role is going to, like, it's hard to word, like, how do you feel like it goes forward and the changes you're going to have to make?
You know, I don't think it's probably useful if I speculate, and it would be at this stage it would be speculation. I remember the SARS epidemic of 2003. I lived in Hong Kong at the time, and that was a big thing. And then almost as soon as it was there, it had gone. So there's a part of me, and this may be a very naive part of me, that says that post-corona or post-lockdown life can return to something resembling normality, and the changes will be minimal. I honestly don't know, though. But I think if you realistically are going to get people doing fight sequences, there has to be close. You can't disinfect every 10 seconds, and you can't avoid physical contact. So, yeah, I think it's people much, much smarter than me will be working out how that's done and what's appropriate. But I would say, I think by the time gyms open and big sporting events with capacity crowds, I think when that's allowed, it probably means that's when film crews can go back to being how they are. But I say that with the caveat that I honestly don't know.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It's a strange one, and I'm very much in the same boat as you. I hope that when it does go as quick as it came, and we can get back to some sense of normality. So, looking through your IMDb, honestly, I couldn't believe the resume you've had. Some of the guys you've worked with over the years, some big names like Jackie Chan and Jet Li and Van Damme, Sammo Hung, Donnie Yen. You know, these are all guys that I grew up watching. I'm pretty sure in your earlier years you grew up watching some of these guys as well, and it's just like I was impressed, to be fair. And so I guess I wanted to go right back to the start before we jump into some of your projects, and basically how you got into the stunt business, how you got into the industry, and why stunts.
When I growing up, I always loved movies as long as I can remember, and I consider myself like a child of that VHS generation. So I discovered a love for films through videotape, even though I would have gone to the cinema once in a while. And on videotape, I was seeing things like Jaws, the Bond movies, Indiana Jones, and then a little bit later in the mid-'80s, there was the ninja movie boom. And I was introduced to ninja films, and that just set off a light bulb in my head and a passion for martial arts and martial art films. So I started studying martial arts, doing karate and judo, and renting as many martial art films on VHS tape as I could get my hands on. And it's only a matter of time, if you're a martial artist, that you discover Bruce Lee. And then a little bit later was Jackie Chan, and then that led into more diverse, perhaps less well-known filmmakers at the time, like Sammo Hung, Yuen Biu, Jet Li, and then to move away from strictly martial arts, then I was discovering the films of John Woo and Ringo Lam and people like that. So that was, a lot of my teenage years were spent, some might say wasted, chasing down Hong Kong films. Not just Hong Kong films though, just cinema in general. A lot of Japanese films I like, French movies. And I knew that when I left school, I wanted to go into the film business and action film business. And perhaps maybe one day directing, maybe acting. But I looked at Hong Kong and I saw in these Hong Kong films, you would see white faces and black faces turning up in these films, often playing villains, doing fighting roles. And I thought that was something I'd like to give a go. So when I was 18 years old, I got on a plane and I flew to Hong Kong. And back then, Hong Kong was a British colony. You didn't need a visa. You could work there. So I went there very naively, very arrogantly, thinking, well, I'm here now. I can kick a little bit. I should be in movies.
18 and you pick up and you move over to Hong Kong. That must have been just mental at that age to go and do it.
I don't know, because the thing is, for me, now I look at it, people have said to me, oh, that was very brave, but I think it's that arrogance and stupidity of youth. and when you're like 18 years old, most of us, if we're lucky, we don't have responsibilities.
Yeah.
So at that time, you can just pack up and go away. And you know, in the back of my head, if it hadn't worked out, it could have just been a gap year, you know. Oh, that didn't work out in Hong Kong. Now I'll come back to the UK and pursue further education or training or whatever.
It is fantastic, because most people, myself included, you kind of, when you look back, you wish you had done something like that, and you did that, and it just totally worked out, and you know, you've had a career out of it, which is fantastic. So when you got over to Hong Kong and everything, you went over there as a young lad and started trying to get into these circles. How did you break into that? Was it easy to get involved with it, or?
It's funny. I mean, I don't know quite how the situation is in Hong Kong now, but back then, Hong Kong feels like a very small place. And you know that expression, everybody knows everybody. That's kind of true.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows everybody, but there's a good chance that somebody will know somebody in the film business or that kind of thing. So, for instance, I've been in Hong Kong a couple of days, and I think I was in the center of town because I just opened a bank account or something, and I was walking past a gym, and the gym was selling memberships, and they were trying to hard sell me on the membership, and they said, oh, what are you doing in Hong Kong? And I said, I'm here trying to work in movies. Oh, one of our trainers, he works in movies. And that afternoon I went back to the gym and I met the guy, and he gave me the details of his agent. And his agent happened to represent a lot of the Western foreign people, fighters that were in movies. So that's kind of how Hong Kong works. And there's no unions in Hong Kong. And I think in the UK, definitely there is sort of a sense of there are gatekeepers and there are people that try and erect walls and stop new blood coming into the industry. I think it's not as bad as it used to be. Yeah. But around that time in the mid to late 90s, it felt that way in the UK, that a lot of stuff was ring-fenced. Hong Kong doesn't have that. It is, or was, I should say, literally the kind of place where you could turn up one day and then within a week be on a movie set doing a fight scene with a star like Jet Li, for instance.
Jeez. And that would have been roughly round about when Jet Li was kind of just kicking off, really, as well. So sort of...
I was a big, and I still am a big Jet Li fan, and I remember at the time I arrived in Hong Kong, the movie Black Mask was in production. Yeah. So that was a film he was doing and involving a lot of Western people. Now, I was too late to audition for that one, but you know, that was the kind of period that he was doing. And then I worked with him, I think, the following year on a movie called Hitman.
Yes.
And just after Hitman, he was off to Hollywood to do Lethal Weapon.
What was Jet Li like to mix it up with? Like, did you have like any sort of fight choreography with him, and how fast actually is the guy?
It wasn't a sequence that involved a lot of combat. There was some moves, but I was an assassin that comes into an apartment trying to kill him, and he fights his way, gets his way free. So we didn't exchange lots of techniques. And looking back at that time, it was probably a good thing because it was very early in my career. I was very green, but I did have a sense of how lucky I was to be in this position, and it was a very special experience. But then I think would have been like the following year, I worked on a film with Yuen Bu, who's like one of my biggest heroes. If people don't know who Yuen Bu is, he's like the younger brother of Sammo Hung and Jackie Chan from opera school. And we did 2 fight scenes together. And Yuen Bu just exceeded my expectations in terms of not just his performance, but his personality. He was a really friendly, cooperative guy, very easy to work with. And that helped keep, my nerves down.
Well, I guess that kind of rolls into a question that I do have about, like, was there anybody at that time when you went over there that sort of took you kind of under their wing, sort of mentored you, kind of helped you progress and showed you the sort of path you were on, or?
There wasn't like one particular person, but I would say that in Hong Kong stunt culture, and perhaps in Chinese culture also to a degree, there is this notion of teaching the younger generation. So I benefited from that, and there was one stunt coordinator, action director called Ridley Choi, who at his time was one of the top stuntmen in Hong Kong. Ridley was somebody that I was very keen to meet. I'd seen some movies that he appeared in and a couple that he directed. And luckily I knew an actor that had worked in his film, so he introduced me to Ridley. And Ridley did give me a lot of good advice and good lessons, and I got to work with him a few times, which was never the easiest experience because he's quite demanding and tough on his stunt performers, but it's that kind of thing that it makes you stronger. And, so I've got a lot of gratitude towards Ridley for giving me opportunity to work with him and see how he worked. And we still keep in touch. And that sort of opens up the other thing about the stunt people in Hong Kong, which is different from maybe in the UK, is a lot of them aren't just physical performers, they are filmmakers.
Right.
And Ridley had gone from being a Peking opera performer to a stunt performer to a choreographer and then a director and action director. So I think he directed his first feature film when he was something like 26 years old. And in Hong Kong, the stunt coordinators, they're usually credited as action directors. They tend to be the ones that direct the action sequence. They dictate the camera positions, the lenses, the speeds, and they may even edit the action sequence or supervise the edit.
I suppose that would be right enough, because most directors most likely wouldn't really think about the fast edit, where the punch is going to land or how the person's going to land. So I guess the stunt choreographer and those guys need to kind of be able to edit that stuff in their heads as they're going. Otherwise, it's not going to be a cohesive kind of. And is that sort of is that something that you've always kept in mind when you're doing your thing?
The first Hong Kong movie I worked on, it was called Downtown Torpedoes. It was a film for Golden Harvest. And I remember when I turned up on set, I recognized a man called Stephen Dongwai. And I thought, oh, he must be directing the movie because Dongwai had directed a few action films. Mm-hmm. But he was actually the action director. He was the stunt coordinator. The film was directed by Teddy Chan. But what Teddy Chan would do was when it came to the action sequences, he would step away and let Stephen Dong get on with it.
That's fantastic.
It is, and it is most of the time. There are occasions where that doesn't work if the director and the choreographer haven't got like a clear communication. Stylistically, there can be differences.
Yeah, it'll look like two different movies, I guess.
Absolutely, and I have seen Hong Kong films like that. But I think the best Hong Kong films are where the director does take a back seat and they ensure that the action director is maintaining the tone that they want or conveying certain character or drama beats within the sequence or plot points. but they trust the person that knows action, who's grown up with action, can actually deliver that sequence. And it's an approach that I would say, by and large, the UK has been very, very resistant to. And I think it's kind of funny because in the late 90s, Yuen Woo-ping went to Australia, made a little film called The Matrix, and all of a sudden, that movie was produced by Joel Silver, and Joel Silver saw, Hong Kong action directors aren't just stunt guys, they're not just choreographers, they're filmmakers. And you saw a flood of Hong Kong action coordinators working in the West. I heard a story that when Corey Yuen was brought on to Lethal Weapon 4, this is a story I heard like third hand, when they looked at the first day's rushes, the fight rushes, Joel Silver was like, I didn't bring that guy from Hong Kong for the fights to look like this. So they actually made sure that he had control of at least one camera, because otherwise he was just choreographing stuff and then the Hollywood guys were shooting it the way that they shot Hollywood fights. So more and more in the 90s, America embraced the Hong Kong style of shooting action, which means giving the stunt people a little bit more input, a bit more control, and also relying less on shooting masters with multiple cameras, less on shooting coverage, and more about shooting specific bits of action with an edit already in mind. And you can just look at certain Hong Kong filmmakers work in Hollywood of that period to see which films had that approach and which ones didn't take that approach. On that movie, The Matrix, there was a gentleman called Chad Stahelski who was doubling Keanu Reeves. And I believe on the sequels, a gentleman called David Leitch was on those as a stunt performer. Now, in Hollywood, they set up the 8711 stunt team, and they adopted the Matrix approach of shooting pre-visualizations or video storyboards of their action sequences. And Chad and David and other members of their team over the, I guess, last 20 years have become known as the go-to guys in Hollywood for directing action sequences. They became very prominent second unit action directors. And now you look at the John Wick films, Deadpool, Atomic Blonde, those gentlemen have proved that they can direct action. So America's kind of embraced that approach.
It's taken a while, but...
it has taken a while, but I'm not saying that every stuntman should become a feature director. But I do think there's a place for letting stunt people direct the action sequences, particularly fight sequences, and particularly stylized fight sequences. And Britain's got quite a long way to go. I think there was some progress, and there are examples. For instance, I'm going to say that the Kingsman movies are British movies because they're independent. They're produced by Matthew Vaughan's company. Matthew Vaughan's all over those films, but Brad Allen is directing those fight sequences. Brad Allen, who was from the Jackie Chan stunt team. You know, and it's Brad making sure that the camera's in the right place, Brad making sure that the edit points work.
That is quite interesting, because the first time I watched that... the Kingsman movie, and obviously I know Matthew Vaughn from sort of coming up with Guy Ritchie and having Layer Cake and all that kind of thing coming out, which is great movies. I love those movies. But then you watch Kingsman, and when you get to that church fight scene with Colin Firth just all of a sudden going, renegade, you realise right then this really isn't much of a Matthew Vaughn movie anymore. And it's totally different.
I think it is in terms of, he's a producer. He's got eyes on it. He will have discussed with the stunt choreographers and stunt coordinator and Brad Allen what he wants from the sequence. But then he has the good sense to let Brad get on with it. And I was very fortunate to work as a performer in that sequence, and also I did a little bit of work as a performer on the previs for it. When that sequence was shot, as I recall, Matthew Vaughn directed the drama stuff in the church, so the bits of dialogue, the hate preacher and so on, right up until the moment where Colin Firth pulls out his gun. And then Matthew Vaughn left to go and do first unit, do some other scene, and it was Brad Allen's set for, I think, another 8 days.
It's an unbelievable sequence, that. It's just incredible.
It is.
Sort of, Yeah, it's one that always gets me, and it's the score over the top as well, just absolutely brilliant. So before we move on a little bit into some other stuff, you mentioned you studied karate and everything, and obviously you've learnt different styles and everything. Like how many different styles of fight do you know, or is it a case of you learnt one or two and mastered them, or?
No, I'm rubbish at a lot of martial arts.
Rubbish.
That's what I say. I'm not good at any of them, but I've dabbled with quite a few. I would say mainly I had a decent foundation in karate, so there was a number of years where I would study that, and up to, training classes up to 4 or 5 times a week. Yeah. But I'm rubbish at a lot. I've done some Shaolin, I've done some Wushu, I've done some Tai Chi, but also you pick up a lot of stuff from working with different stunt people who have different martial arts backgrounds, and also being exposed to lots of action cinema and watching, for instance, the UFC. You're soaking up different techniques. Often, when on Gangs of London, for instance, my right-hand man on that is a gentleman called Chris Webb, and Chris is a very knowledgeable martial artist. He's like an encyclopedia of techniques, and sometimes if I'm choreographing and I've got an idea, I'll show Chris something, and he's like my sounding board, and I'll go, Chris, is this bullshit, or is this a legit technique? And he'll tell me straight, oh yes, that's absolutely fine, or yes, but you could also do this. I find that I don't know. I think now with like the UFC and so on, we're in almost like a post-style world of martial arts where everybody's drawing on different things.
No, it is a case of we all need to know a lot of different stuff, and I suppose being proficient enough in different ones will get you going.
Absolutely.
So you started off doing Hong Kong movies in the foreign language and everything, but then you also started doing the American movies and the British movies as well. And I wanted to, I suppose we've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but how different is it going from the Hong Kong style of stunt choreography to the American?
I would say it does very much depend on what type of picture you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, if I'm doing a movie like Sandcastle or Private War, for instance, you're not doing stylized action sequences. So for that, a stunt coordinator's role is very much to come up with safe ways of telling the action story and maybe giving suggestions to the director. But then you're not so concerned with the beats, the rhythms and so on of the action scene and how it's even photographed, as long as it's photographed in a way that's going to allow it to be safe. But I would say that the main difference is in working in the UK, particularly. When I came back to the UK, if I'm honest, I felt a lot of the action was very backward compared to Hong Kong. And not just on big budget movies, but also on small budget movies. One of the first features I stunt coordinated on, there was a little bit of an altercation in this underpass. And I noticed that they would shoot the whole scene, including the dialogue, from every single angle. And I understood it, and I kind of appreciate it more now that, okay, for the actors, it made sense to run the whole scene, to go through all the emotions, and not just do their bits.
Yeah.
But it felt inefficient for me. And I think with drama, maybe sometimes you do need to shoot the whole scene for the dialogue, for the characters to go through the emotional peaks and troughs. But when it comes to action, I think it's much safer 90% of the time to divvy it up into specific shots and do it that way. Whereas I think British filmmakers tend to be quite reluctant to do that. And then once again, the idea of handing over to the stunt people to film stuff and direct stuff, in Hong Kong, they wouldn't think twice of doing that. But over here, it's the exception as opposed to the norm.
Yeah.
I've done Indian movies that have shot in the UK. And I remember on one of the Indian movies, we had 2 days to shoot a fight sequence. And I remember at the end of I think it was the end of the second day, one of the production guys came up to me and handed me a phone. And I said, hello? And it was the director. And he said, oh, Jude, I'm really sorry I had to leave you this afternoon, but I needed to see some locations for next week. Have you got me some good stuff? And I think that's the thing that's come from Asia, is sort of trusting the action people to get on with the action. Where here, certainly, when I came back to the UK, it was around 2004. That would have been very unusual on a British film. Yeah. And even on some of the low-budget independent movies I did, I remember one of them, the producer contacted me and he said, oh, I saw the fights you did in such and such a movie, which was another British film. Yeah. I've got some fights in my film. I want you because I want you to make sure that the camera's in the right place.
And that was it.
And I thought, oh, well, it wasn't, because I was still in this Hong Kong movie mindset that, okay, the stunt guy will come in and direct the action sequence.
Ah, right.
But the producer never said to the DOP, I've brought this guy on because listen to him. So I think on that fight scene, that first day, I think the director of photography, the camera team, the first assistant were all thinking, who the hell's this guy? Why is he telling us how to shoot it? Why is he telling us what shutter angle to use? Why is he telling us how this is going to be cut together? Mm-hmm. So that was a lesson I had to learn. It's just a different approach. I remember talking to a very established, respected British stunt coordinator who's like a veteran of the industry, and he's got a very impressive CV. And he was talking about the Kingsman movies, and he was talking about Brad Allen. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh yeah, Brad likes to shoot stuff in little bits, but you've got to shoot more. You've got to give the editor options. And I said, I don't think Brad wants to give the editor options.
Yeah.
It's a different approach. I'm not saying one is right 100% of the time, but when in Hong Kong, generally, most of the time, the stunt coordinator would direct the action sequence. He wouldn't shoot coverage, and it was pretty clear how the scene should cut together. Now, I understand if you're doing a multi-million-dollar movie, and director's going to have opinion, producer's going to have opinion, maybe you can't do that. But if you've got the budget, then shoot a previs. And when you do a previs, that's where you try the different coverage. That's where you try the different angles. And in the editing process of the previs, you explore the different permutations of how it might cut together. Mm-hmm. You come to a decision, and this is bringing me into how Gareth Evans works. When we're on set, we know how we want it to cut together. So we don't waste time doing, let's run that for an extra 10 seconds just in case, or let's do another angle just in case, because we know how we want it to cut together. And when Brad Allen is on set, and when Gareth Evans is on set, the previs is on a laptop, and the footage from the cameras, because most of the time we're shooting digitally these days, gets piped down to that laptop, and piece by piece, like a jigsaw puzzle, the proper camera footage replaces the previs shots, cut for cut. And if we go out of sequence, it might go movie footage, previs footage, back to movie footage. But we know that the rhythms are correct, the directions of action are right, and that sort of thing.
Is that how Gareth Evans works most of the time, or for his?
Absolutely. I've worked with Gareth on 3 projects now, Apostle, Gangs of London, and then Havoc, which obviously we're still designing on. Yeah. And we will have the previs on set, and the footage comes from the camera over to his laptop, and he edits as he goes. And not only does it take the guesswork out of things, you don't get a nasty surprise a week later in the edit and go, oh, that doesn't cut together. We're going to need to reshoot that. Oh, sorry, you can't reshoot that because you've torn down the set. I've had that on other projects. What you get is, it cuts together, and also it's much safer for the stunt performers and the actors because they're not needlessly repeating something. One thing that really gets my goat, and I've seen it too many times on film and TV sets is an inexperienced director who doesn't actually know what they want, going, let's do one more.
Yeah.
Let's do another just in case. And I kind of feel like, why? Why are we going again? If you need to go again and there's a valid reason, absolutely. Like if you have somebody doing a stair fall, that's a nasty stunt potentially. And if you go, well, I could see that they were, they were kind of throwing themselves down at one point, or I saw the stunt double's face too clearly, or the wig came off. Or, those are all legit reasons. But there are some directors that will go, oh, let's do it again. And that, anytime you repeat a stunt, you're increasing the likelihood of an injury.
Yeah.
In the same way, if you shoot a fight sequence and you're doing it in chunks of 5 seconds, it's much safer than saying to the actor who's got to fight 10 stuntmen, okay, we're going to shoot the fight a bunch of times with a bunch of different cameras and different lenses, and the editor will make sense of it. Sometimes that can look good, but you're much more likely that you're going to get punches that miss or punches that accidentally connect, injuries happening, and so on. So I do think if the budget's there, previs and follow the previs is the way to go.
No, that's quite interesting. I hadn't even that's not something. Obviously, I'm not well versed in that line of work, so it's something I had no idea would even be capable. And it sounds like it should be. I'm guessing it is the standard, or it's going to be like working that way.
I think it's the standard in lots of places, but not so much over here in the UK. So I'm sure that the people making Atomic Blonde had their previs on set, and they followed it shot for shot, and they may even done that thing of editing on set because they had invisible cuts, like stitched shots and things like that. But in the UK, it's quite unusual. Yeah. Sometimes it's because producers don't want to pay for the previs, because you're paying stunt people to be in a space, either a studio or a gym. You're paying for their time, and you're paying to video it and edit it. And some people don't see the value of it. It's only when you show them a sequence, like, for instance, the pub fight in Gangs of London, episode 1. We would not have been able to do that sequence in the time we had if we hadn't spent a couple of weeks prevising it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. You should. I guess that's just the little England mentality. We're just stubborn, aren't we?
I think so, but also I think there's a couple of things at play. I think our industry has a lot of snobbery in it.
Right.
But of course, there will be exceptions, but I think people don't want to necessarily see stunt people as filmmakers. And then also, I think there's a little bit about the mystique of filmmaking that British directors, a lot of the time, not always, don't feel good about handing over to somebody else to direct the action sequence. Yeah. It hurts their ego. Whereas they could actually say, well, this person has been doing action for 10 years or 20 years. It's what they do. My job as a director, rather like how they would talk to a visual effects supervisor, is they would think they don't know how to do the visual effects themselves, or they don't know how to compose a musical score themselves, but they can explain to that composer, with this piece of music, I want to evoke this emotion, or this is the tone of the story and the film and the characters. And that's how it can be with an action scene. But I think a lot of British filmmakers are quite resistant to it. And I've experienced that firsthand. I mean, it's funny. It tends to be the more experienced the director is, the more open they are to ideas and contributions and relinquishing control. The less experienced, I think they probably feel insecure about themselves. Yeah. And that's when they can get uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess because when you first come out the gate, you're like, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do everything myself.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you look at, I've not had a chance to watch the movie, but Extraction, this film that's done very well on Netflix.
Yes.
It's directed by Sam Hargrave, who's a former stunt performer.
Yeah, I saw that.
He's operating camera a lot of the time. Now, Sam Hargrave's not going to pretend that he knows more about cameras than the director of photography, but there will be a time and a place where it's better for somebody with a stunt background who has conceived an action sequence to operate the camera.
Yeah.
And once again, in Hong Kong, not a problem. In India, not a problem. I've done Indian features where the director of photography said, do you want to take this shot, and just handed me the camera. Over here, people can get funny about it.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that's strange because a lot of DOPs don't have a problem letting a Steadicam operator take a shot, because that Steadicam operator has a specific set of skills to quote a movie. But yeah, I do think that there's still a bit of that British snobbery. I hope I'm not coming across as too negative. I'm just being honest. That's my experience. And I would say that working with someone like Gareth Evans, he directs his action sequences. He's not using a second unit director most of the time. He wants to be the guy to do it. Gareth knows what he's doing. And there are British directors that do know how to do action, I think. And I think, not that I've worked with him, but I would say someone like Neil Marshall certainly has a sense of how to shoot action. Yeah. Maybe not a martial arts fight, but he's got an aptitude for it. But some directors don't. And I think if they don't, maybe it's better to hand off to somebody that does.
Yeah.
And, on American TV shows, American features, and I think we're seeing more and more willingness to relinquish those sequences. But over here in the UK, it's a little bit slower. But hopefully, maybe a show like Gangs of London will open people's eyes to actually, this is what can be achieved on a TV schedule and a TV budget if you put the planning in and the right people in, and you let them do their jobs.
Well, we're going to get to Gangs in a little moment, because that is one of the main reasons that I wanted to speak to you, because that show was impressive as hell. But we've been talking about sort of like the studios, the directors, the producers, and everything for a little bit there. I wanted to know, is there, in all the projects you've done, is there any actors or actresses who have impressed you when it's come to doing the stunt choreography or the fighting or anything like that? Is there anyone who's sort of stood out as impressive?
It's going to sound like just convenient publicity, but genuinely, Choi who plays Elliot in Gangs of London, by a country mile, just blew me and all the stunt team away. And he fights better than a lot of stunt performers. I mean, that guy is incredible. And he's also, I kind of hate him because he's also a really good-looking guy. He's very charismatic and he's an amazing actor. But he's got a real aptitude for action. I mean, it was funny. With Gangs, we spent, I think it was 3 months choreographing the action before hard prep. And then when we were... And the character of Elliot had not been cast. Certain actors' names were in the mix. So we were choreographing these fights, not knowing who we were going to get to perform them. And obviously, we know that stunt doubles can be used and so on. But we and Gareth have proved these things, and a lot of the time you're seeing the face of the person. And I will say, some people cannot be taught how to fight on camera, at least not up to that level. So there was a bit of anxiety. And then some of the actors that were shortlisted for the role would come in and do a drama audition for the director and so on. But then they would be sent to us for an action assessment. And when Choi came in and did his action assessment, I was very impressed. And when I heard he got the part, I was very relieved as well, because I thought this guy can make the fights look good, and he did.
Yeah.
He really did.
I remember when I first started talking to Spencer about the show and everything, and I says to him, I says, look, you had me at Gareth Evans and you had me at Joe Cole, because big Peaky Blinders fan, big Raid fan. So I was kind of like, you had me at both these things. And that was the actor he said, Choi. He basically said, you're going to love both those guys, Gareth and Joe doing their thing. He's like, but watch out for this guy. He's gonna absolutely mesmerise you. And I think it's the first episode when he has the fight in the block of flats.
Yeah.
That is just... It's just incredible, that scene. And it just sets the tone for the rest of the show as well, to be honest. But when they do... when he does kind of like a DDT-style move... I'm sorry, I'm a wrestling fan, so I'm going to bring that out. But he kind of does a DDT-style move onto that massive cinder block in the middle of the room. And straight away I was just kind of like... Yeah, this is about as Gareth Evans as it gets.
Are we talking about the flip onto the washing machine?
That's it, the washing machine. Yeah. It's just incredible scenes, and the show never lets up on the action when it comes to that. It gets bigger and better and bigger and better. But yeah, that guy, 100%. I can see why you would be impressed by that guy, because those scenes are fantastic.
The thing was, Chris and myself, we met him, and then Chris had a couple of weeks to train Chopay, and then with Chopay's stunt double, they learnt the fights. But then I think it was on the first or the second day of filming, and obviously, as it is with TV, things get shot out of sequence.
Yeah.
We were on set, and it's just after the pub fight. Elliot's chasing this Albanian gangster called Besmir, and Besmir falls down into the parking lot on an estate, and Elliot climbs down a drain pipe and is walking towards him, and Besmir pulls out a knife. And I remember looking at the monitor, and it was just a single shot of Chopay as if he's walking towards Besmir. And I remember thinking, oh my God, who is this guy? He's a movie star. And then Chris was next to me, and he had the same thing. Chris had spent 2 weeks, 5 days a week training the guy, joking, sweating, eating lunch together. Mm-hmm. And then Chris was like, who is this guy I'm watching? Chopay projects. And we were like elbowing each other. And on cut, I think we said to Gareth, or we said to Matt Flannery, who is the director of photography and co-creator, it's really good. And everyone's like nodding, going, I know. It's like, I think everybody on the crew got a sense that this gentleman is a discovery.
Yeah.
And it's been really gratifying, like looking on Twitter and things. It's one thing to see critics responding to him and singling him out, but seeing in the Twitter sphere people going, Chopay Dirisu next James Bond, and Chopay Dirisu, that guy's a star, and I go, yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I can see it. Like I say, I bought into it straight away for 2 reasons. Mostly it was Joe Cole and it was Gareth Evans, but yeah, as soon as he comes on the screen, it's very much his show, to be honest. And you're sitting there thinking, hang on, I thought this was a Joe Cole show.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I know I don't really want to put you on the spot or anything, but is there any actresses or actors that you've worked with that you've just thought you've not really got it?
Plenty of times.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to name names. But,
God, no.
I think there are some actors and actresses that give it everything they have, and they're humble and focused, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
Really, that's all you can ask for. And there are some people who they just haven't. It's like I honestly don't think everybody can be taught how to dance. I don't think everybody can be taught how to do fight sequences convincingly. And I think all you can ask is people to be humble and to try.
Yeah.
But then there is a place for stunt doubles. Now, I would say if you're doing something like Gareth Evans style, Gareth doesn't want to always be shooting stunt doubles. He wants to shoot the fight how he thinks is best for the fight, and then have the actor learn that and perform that. And there will, of course, be times when we're prevising. I'll say, actually, Gareth, not with fights, but with stunts. I'll say, this bit's probably going to have to be a stunt double, so we might have to rethink where the camera goes.
Yeah.
But, yeah, some people, I don't think you can. One thing that bugs me, and I see it a lot, is I think the Matrix has got a lot to answer for, both good and bad. On the one hand, it showed actors doing choreography, and it opened up this Hong Kong action style to Hollywood and to the wider world. But on the other hand, it made actors think they should do all the fights, and directors think that you shouldn't use stunt doubles. And a lot of the time when I look at fights, I see actors doing choreography, i.e. it doesn't feel like a fight. Yeah. It looks like they have learned the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a real bugbear for me. I personally don't like to watch that.
No.
And if I'm action directing something, if I've got control of where the camera is and the editing, I'll do an action assessment with the actor if I can. But then I will use a stunt double as much as I think is necessary to get the scene done. And I don't believe you always need to see the face of the person. I don't think it's about that. I think it's a combination. I think when a portrayal of a character, it's not just down to that one actor.
Yeah.
The stunt double is also involved. Possibly stand-ins, like photo doubles are involved. Possibly visual effects, totally digital doubles are involved. And then also I would say the hair and makeup and the costume all play into creating that character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so sometimes you need to rely on the stunt doubles to get the job done. And there was a movie about 20 years ago, I think, called The Musketeer. It was an independent film shot in the Netherlands, and I'm trying to remember. I think Freddie Prinze Jr. may have been the star, but it was a fun, and Tim Roth was the villain, and it had very Hong Kong style action in that, and the action director for that was a gentleman called Hong Yen, who's a Hong Kong action director, and he's also a martial arts actor. He's been in like Once Upon a Time in China too, and things like that. I read an interview he did where the journalist was saying, "Oh, did you do a boot camp with your actors like they did on The Matrix?" And Hong Yen is a very blunt guy, and he said, "You're not going to, in 6 months, you're not going to get actors to look as good as what it's taken me 15 years to get to." And I thought, okay. So he used a lot of doubling. And, you know, you'll see that. The Musketeers are wearing their hats, and it might be a top shot or it's style. And to be honest, I think his stunt doubles, sword play, is always going to be better than the actors.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not saying you always want to be on the back of a head or doing a top shot, but I think there has to be, you know, we have to know when to use doubles, and sometimes it is a case of just you use a stunt double for the thing that's dangerous.
Yeah, like you say, I think Keanu Reeves in The Matrix has a lot to blame for that.
Yeah, you know, and I have to say that when you watch John Wick, that's Keanu doing his fights. He doesn't do all the stunts, but he does the fights, he does the action, and he does it very convincingly. And there are actors that can do their own action very convincingly. So I'm not saying you should always double them, but I think sometimes it's better to do that. And here's another thing that when I was growing up in the 90s and I was watching a lot of Hong Kong films, and people would say, "Oh, they don't use stunt doubles in Hong Kong," and they absolute rubbish. Everybody gets doubled, but they know how to do it judiciously, so you can't tell. And that's how it should be, really. And nowadays, it's actually easier to use stunt doubles because things like face replacement are within a lot of productions' reach.
Yeah, I mean, look at the sort of the de-aging techniques they've got in some of these movies now. It's pretty amazing what you can do with a little bit of CG.
Yeah.
So, on your movies, when you've been doing your stunt choreography and your stand-in work and a lot of these things you've been performing in as well, what's the worst injury you've sustained? Because every stuntman picks up injuries, as we know, and what's the worst one you can think of?
Well, first thing I want to say is when I'm stunt coordinating, I try not to be in front of camera.
Right.
So if that's happened, it tends to be either the budget is very, very low, or it's just a one-off gag. So, you know, we know where the camera is. It's better for a stunt coordinator, I think, to be not part of the scene and to have eyes on what's going on.
Yeah.
I've not suffered anything that I would say was a serious injury.
Cool.
There's a lot of wear and tear. You know, if you perform stunts for 20 years, your joints are going to feel it, and that kind of thing. But I think, I think touch wood, I've not had to go to hospital for anything. You know, so I've been fortunate. But having said that, you know, our job is to create the illusion of danger a lot of the time, and to remove as much of the risk as possible. And obviously things like using wires or using fireproof clothing or wearing pads, that can take away a lot of those are safety measures. Yeah. But also sometimes the safety measure is having a stunt performer do it rather than an actor, because the stunt performer knows how to fall or knows how to follow instructions. I think one thing people sometimes forget is you can have a very good actor who's very good at following instructions, but when they're performing around pyrotechnics, for instance, they may be in the scene and in the character and not be able to clinically go, okay, the first explosion goes off, I need to take 3 steps to my right, then another explosion is going off to the left, I must make sure my eyes are closed a second before that. Because they're swept up in the emotion of it, because that's their job, whereas stunt performer should be able to focus on the instructions and follow those. You know, I've been in situations, I did one film where I was doubling an actor who's getting beaten up, and the actor who was beating me up, I said to him, look, you're going to throw me to the floor, I'm going to try to get up to all floor, or get up on all fours, I want you to kick my arm away so I go flat on the ground, and then you're going to stamp on my back. And he was like, yep, good. This was a young guy, he was intelligent, he was a good actor. On action, he threw me to the floor, I got up on all fours, and he just football kicked me in the ribs.
Jesus.
And he wasn't doing it deliberately to be horrible.
No,
but he'd got caught up in motion, and he'd, rather than go, oh, sorry, I've forgotten the choreography, which was really simple choreography, he just went with what felt right.
Just winged it.
Yeah.
And is there ever, you know, when you've been watching a project that you've worked on and you've put your blood, sweat and tears into getting it right to go on screen, has there ever been a moment when you've sat back and watched a movie on the big screen or a TV show episode and you've been like, I did really good work that day, that looks amazing?
Well, I would say it is a team effort. It's not it's not just down to me, but
of course.
A lot of the time it's the other way, that you'll work really hard on something and then you'll see how it's been edited or it will have been cut out, and that can be quite heartbreaking because you are emotionally invested in it. So, you know, there have been times where it's been the other way, where, you know, myself and the team have worked really hard on a fight and we've tried really hard to incorporate interesting techniques that follow a logic and follow a believability, and then it just gets chopped up in the edit and you go, well, why did we bother spending 2 weeks choreographing that for it to look like that? Yeah. But I would say I'm very happy with how some of the action sequences in Gangs of London have turned out, and particularly episode 5 of Gangs of London.
Oh God.
I am proud of that, and I'm proud on Gareth's behalf as well, because I think he as a director turned in a 15-minute action movie.
Yeah.
And it's not just an action sequence, it's a slow burn for the first half, and it's about tension. And Gareth Evans is a master of action and shooting action sequences, but I think people possibly don't give him enough credit that he's a master of tension, and he's actually a very good director in terms of establishing relationships and establishing dynamics. And I think episode 5 of Gangs of London is something really special. I remember when I read the script, before I think I'd done any work on the show, and reading that script and knowing that Gareth was going to direct it, I was excited. And then as we were designing the action and seeing the previews, I was like, okay, this could be really special. And then seeing it, you know, you see obviously it getting edited on set, but then later on he will show me, you know, visual effects shots as they were being dropped in, and then the sound design. So I'm really happy with episode 5, and I would say that it's great. Once again, looking on Twitter, a lot of people showing a lot of love for that episode. Now, I would say there will be some people that will look at that stuff and they'll be like, well, that's ridiculous. You can't fire that many bullets without reloading. And I kind of go, yeah, you're absolutely right. This probably isn't your show.
Yeah.
Because I grew up on John Woo movies, and you had the same thing. People would fire their weapon for a minute, and then they would reload, or they wouldn't reload at all. And you know you're not watching a documentary. You're not watching Saving Private Ryan. You're watching something that's stylized and heightened. And I know that with episode 5, Gareth and I were paying homage to John Woo. We were paying homage to Ringo Lam. So, yeah, it's really nice to see people going crazy for that episode. And also, and this is where I can't take any of the credit, but I'm happy for Gareth. I love that people are emotionally engaged with the story of that episode. If people haven't seen Gangs of London, they probably won't know what we're talking about. But it's almost like a spin-off episode. You wouldn't need to see the other episode to understand what's going on. So yeah,
it's 100% because when the show came out, they were dropping an episode at a time on I think it was on Sky Atlantic, and I was watching it week to week. And then I saw somebody on Twitter and Facebook going absolutely mad about episode 5. Just like, when you get to this episode, forget every other TV show you've ever watched. You know, this is like event television right here. And I was like, right, well, the whole thing is on Now TV, so I'm just going to have to subscribe to Now TV, and I'm going to have to watch it all. So I blitzed through it, but literally, you're right, episode 5, and I described it on the podcast on our main show as just an absolute masterclass episode of TV. As you say, the storytelling between the father coming to the son, the whole thing right up until the bit on the jetty, which, you know, if you haven't seen it, I don't really want to spoil it, but it's a fantastic moment with the father and son. And I'm watching it with them. The wife was watching it as well. And when he keeps getting back up, and she's like, well, that's just a bit silly. And I'm sitting there going, it's not, though. It really isn't. And it's absolutely in keeping with the show because it is hyper-realistic. But it's just that episode, And I described it to a friend as the most Gareth Evans you'll ever see Gareth Evans. Just the episode's fantastic. I loved it.
I'm really happy with it, and I'm very happy that Gareth's getting plaudits for it, because I know he put a lot of heart and soul into that, and also he shot it in Wales with the Welsh crew and a lot of Welsh cast members. I mean, something special to him as well.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, I think it's you know, there's no fighting in that episode. It's all gunplay and pyrotechnics. It's quite special.
So I'm about to get into that, but before we do, very quickly, I recently watched Ip Man 4. And you worked on Ip Man 4 as well with Donnie Yen and Danny Kwan Chan. A fantastic film. I was super looking forward to this because I'm a fan of the franchise, and of course I saw that Scott Adkins was coming in, who I'm a massive fan of Scott Adkins, and Mark Strange gets a nice little fight as well. So I was looking forward to seeing this. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did on this and how it was to be on this epic franchise?
I have to say my involvement was quite minimal on that show. I was brought in for just a couple of sequences, and none of them, and it wasn't any of the major fights. So it wasn't the Scott Adkins or Mark Strange stuff. They were shooting in the UK around the Liverpool Wirral area, and obviously Master Yuen Wo-ping and his team are coming over, but for various reasons, insurance reasons and so on, they want to have a UK stunt coordinator as a point of contact, and to make sure that the health and safety side is taken care of. And the line producers and the UK producers know me because they do a lot of Hong Kong and Chinese projects that come to the UK. So they know me, and they know that I speak Cantonese and so on. And then I believe a friend of mine in Hong Kong also recommended me to the production. So I got asked about, would you like to be the stunt coordinator for some sequences we're doing in the UK? And of course, it's a Donnie Yen film, and it's Yuen Wo-ping, so absolutely. And it's funny for me, in terms of like ticking boxes, I'm very fortunate that I work with Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, Jet Li, and a lot of my favorite action choreographers like Corey Yuen and Tony Cheng Siu Dong. I haven't worked with Yuen Wo-ping, so that was a big tick in a box for me. The listeners won't know this, but just over my shoulder is a poster for Snake in Eagle's Shadow, which Master Yen directed. So, you know. And I remember the main sequences were, they were shooting in a school which was meant to be in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Yip Man's niece is getting bullied by some high school students. So I said to the UK producers, okay, those students can't just be extras and they can't just be actors. If they're going to be doing action choreographed by Yuen Woo-ping and his team with Donnie Yen, these people need to either be stunt performers or, and this is where it's difficult because of the age bracket, they need to have the skills that they can do the action and do it safely. So I helped to shortlist a bunch of potential performers, and then they came in and did castings. And then when we were filming, I acted kind of like a bridge between those young British performers and the Hong Kong team. And because I could speak Cantonese, I could help translate instructions and so on and so forth. So yeah, there was that fight where they're bullying the niece, and then Donnie Yen turns up and beats them up. And then there was also another sequence involving some cheerleading, which had some wire work, which I was involved in very, very peripherally, because, you know, those Hong Kong guys, they know how to do their wire work.
No, it's Ip Man's it's a great franchise. It's one that I've, you know, grown up loving those kind of films. Ip Man's kind of filled a bit of a void for a few years, and I was pleased to see that you had your name on that as well. It was cool.
For me, it was just a real joy to work with Yuen Woo-ping, because I've been admiring his work for years. You know, Drunken Master, he directed it, you know, Snake and Eagle Shadow, and then he discovered Donnie Yen. You know, he's a really important figure in Hong Kong cinema, and then, of course, action cinema, because The Matrix, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which won Oscars. So that was great. It was great to work with him and to see how he worked. And I noticed that, you know, once again, there's a film, you've got the director, Wilson Yip, but Yuen Woo-ping directed the action sequences. But Wilson Yip's still there.
Yeah.
He still has his opinion. They still have the communications. It doesn't have to be antagonistic or who's jostling for control. But I noticed at one point they were talking with, the crew had been choreographing something for a few hours. And then Master Yen just stopped and shook his head, and he questioned what he'd been doing, whether it was the right approach for the character.
Right.
And it was very gratifying to see one of the best, most famous action choreographers be willing to say, oh, maybe I've made a mistake here.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of humility there. It was all in service of the sequence and in service of the film. It's funny because I've seen stunt coordinators and directors get defensive when they make a mistake, and they just sort of dig their heels and go, no, it needs to be this way because of blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, you might impress 10 people on the set, but this is not good for the people watching the movie. Yeah. But Yuen Woo-ping had the focus of, okay, let's do it in service of the sequence and the story. And then it was also fun seeing him choreograph. Obviously, he has a stunt team that do the bulk of the choreography, and he's like a general with an overview. But he was coming up with some of the more comedic aspects of the sequence, the mischievous stuff, because Donnie Yen's character, Yip Man's not just going to beat the crap out of these students. That would be wrong. He's going to teach them a lesson. Yeah. So he's, you know, pulling their noses, you know, and kicking them up the backside. And to watch Yuen Woo-ping do that was fun. I think he's got quite a mischievous nature.
And smacks one of the kids with a hockey stick on the ass.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a great film. It's a great film. I really enjoyed watching it.
It's funny. I think the kid that gets the hit on the ass is Craig Canning, who's a young, very capable stunt guy. Right. And I brought him onto Gangs of London. He played one of the kids that gets killed in episode 5. He gets shot just outside the farmhouse. Because Craig's one of the few professional stuntmen in the UK that looks that sort of age. And I think that's been a problem for him, because he often needs sports facial hair. Yeah. And when Yip Man 4 came up, he had this big ginger beard, and I was like, I can't tell you what the project is, Craig, but I think you should shave and come to an audition, because I think it's going to be worth your while. Yeah. And they loved him. And so he played the boyfriend of the school bully in that scene.
Brilliant. So Gangs of New York, sorry, Gangs of London. Let's talk a little bit about Gangs. We've already done a little bit, but this is one that, as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. Completely. It's another one of these shows like when Game of Thrones came out, started to change the landscape of what was happening with TV. I think Gangs is 100% going to be changing the landscape, because some of the stuff Gareth Evans does in this show is just, it's nothing I've seen, not for a long time, or if ever. So how exactly did you yourself, obviously you're a proficient stunt coordinator and you're very well known, you've got a good CV about you, how did you come to work on Gangs of London with Gareth Evans?
Well, Gareth's a big Hong Kong movie fan.
Yeah.
So I think he was aware of my work in Hong Kong from like a long time ago. The first project he did in the UK after doing the Raid movies was a film for Netflix called Apostle. So I was asked, I believe he spoke to his producers and said that he wanted me to be involved in the choreography on Apostle.
Yeah.
So that was the first time we worked together. That was my cat just making a cameo appearance. So we worked on Apostle together. Apostle's like a folk horror film, but there are a few fight sequences.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want them to look like the Raid. But Gareth wanted, I think Gareth knows, one, he wants the fights in anything he works on to be of a certain standard. But also he knows that if his name's associated with a project, if the fights are suddenly subpar, it doesn't look really good and it doesn't satisfy the audience. So I think he felt that because of my Hong Kong background and because we have a very similar sort of bunch of references, that he knew that he and I would have a similar approach to how to shoot action, and also we could say to each other, well, you remember that bit in Burning Paradise, the Ringo Lam movie, blah, blah, blah. So Apostle, we worked very well together. And then that led to, cut a long story short, that led to Gangs of London, which was, I think, about a year and a half after Apostle, we started working together on that.
And what was, when he kind of came to you and asked you to be part of the project, because it's a very big, it's a very bold project, especially for British TV, I thought. What was your sort of reaction to it? Obviously you would have been into getting on board, but what was just kind of like, what did you see for the show?
Well, because once again, it's because it's Gareth.
Yeah.
you know that there will be an expectation. This wasn't Gangs of London wasn't a project that Gareth chased after and developed. He was approached to do it,
right.
and then he and Matt Flannery developed it. I believe the producers at Pulse Films had bought the intellectual property to the game Gangs of London.
Yeah, and
then they approached Gareth and Matt off the back of the Raid movies. So Gareth. And I think they wanted to do a series of films, and Gareth said, well, actually, I think this is something that's better developed as a TV show so we can spend more time with the characters and look at different gangs. But there are plenty of interviews and press that Gareth's done. He can explain that stuff better than me. But I think if you're a producer, you don't hire Gareth Evans and Matt Flannery to do a show and then expect the action sequences to be like your regular British TV show.
Yeah.
That would be very unwise. And, the way the show has been marketed is they say, from Matt Flannery and Gareth Evans, the creators of the Raid franchise.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, you watched it because of Gareth Evans, Joe Cole.
Yeah.
If there had been no action in the first 2 hours, you might think, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Or if the action had looked like what you get in a normal British TV show. And I'm not including Game of Thrones in that, because Game of Thrones isn't normal. They do some really big epic stuff and some really good stunt work, but your normal show. So I knew that if it's Gareth, it's going to be ambitious. And I know that when I work with Gareth, I'm going to be pushed and I'm going to be tested because I need to come up with something good and something that's going to challenge me. And I might have an idea which I think is really good or really creative, and it's not quite going to land for him. And he's not going to go, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, let's do that. He might go, well, actually. But the thing is, Gareth genuinely is a really nice human being and also a very humble and collaborative filmmaker. So if he doesn't accept your idea or if he pushes you to do something else, it's always about what's in service of the project, and it's not about egos. And in the same way, if he's got something on the printed page, and when I start choreographing it with my team, I go, well, actually, Gareth, you may have written that, but that's not really playing great for us. He doesn't get defensive. He'll look at it. Okay. And there's a good chance that we will abandon what's on the page in favor of something that's more appropriate. So yeah, I knew we were going to be tested. I knew when I read episode 5, this isn't going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be easy, but also it's a rare opportunity to do good action. Honestly, when you think of, I think it's very easy to think of American TV shows and American films, Hong Kong TV shows where action is a selling point. Yeah. There aren't many British films or TV shows I think you can do that. I don't think there are many British films or TV shows where you can take a sequence from one of those and hold it up and compare it to the best of Hollywood or the best of Hong Kong.
Well, one of the things I absolutely loved about the show as well, not so much, well, it is about the show, but the first trailer or the first couple of trailers that I saw for this TV show was literally just Joe Cole looking broody. It was a lot of that, dealing with the family aspect and everything. So when it came to it, I honestly thought maybe we're getting something very, very different here from Mr. Evans. I was kind of like, maybe we're not going to be getting like the raid, which really excited me as well. And I was glad that we got a lot of that, a lot of the storytelling, like you say. But we did also get, we got the raid on TV as well. So I was happy with both things. But it's an interesting project. It's a very interesting project, and the TV show, it's just fantastic. So it does have a lot of big action sequences in it. How long did you have to prep these, before going to shoot and everything? Did you have to have all of them prepped, or?
That's kind of a yes and no. We had 12 weeks of action design before pre-production. So what that involved is a rehearsal space was rented out, and we would choreograph the fights or the action sequences, and we would build walls and structures with cardboard boxes to represent whatever we needed it to do. So we had 12 weeks of that. Yeah. And the traveller camp attack at the end of episode 2, which is obviously a very big one, we did that in an actual sound stage of a studio at 3 Mills because a normal rehearsal space isn't big enough. Yeah. So we had 3 months of that, and then when we were shooting, we also, when we had the opportunities, we also did more action design for a couple of things because, as is the case with episodic television, schedule change, scripts get tweaked, and suddenly you need to come up with something new or something different. So, for instance, I think it's the episode 3. It begins with a scene that's meant to be in Turkey, and this character Lale is trying to get to her husband. Right. Yeah. And there's a bit of a running gun battle, and then she discovers he's basically been cooked alive. We had planned to do a big vehicle sequence that got cut. And then when it came to, a few months down the line, there was talk about not having any action at all, and it just opening on the discovery of her finding her husband. Right. And Gareth was like, no, I think we can do something. So he and I, within the schedule and the budget that we had, I think we can do something in a day. So we put our heads together and we choreographed, and we spent a day of rehearsal and previs, and then a day to shoot that cold opening of episode 3. And what happened? And a day is pretty tight because that had to include all the gun battle, but also the drama where Naja's the actor who plays Lale, where she discovers her husband. That's a lot to do in one day, but because we planned it, what actually happened is, in the sequence, it begins with a top shot where the camera comes down and it looks like there's been a car crash or something, and Lale's in the back of this pickup truck, and then she gets down and she's shooting her way and getting into the building, and then she shoots some more people in the building, and then she runs and finds her husband. Well, we started the filming day doing the interior gun battle stuff. So we shot that, we got to her discovering her husband, and at that moment, Gareth stayed with the actor inside doing the drama, while I went outside with her stunt double and shot as much of the coverage as we could get away with using the stunt double. Yeah. And then when Gareth had finished doing the drama scene, he came back outside and joined me, and then we shot what was left with Najed. You can only do that kind of thing if you've planned. Yeah. But it was a little bit of a by the seat of your pants, in that we didn't have weeks and weeks and months of prep to do it. Mm-hmm. And, credit not just to Gareth and to the stunt team, but to the special effects people and to the art department and the production designers, because they created a pretty impressive looking set with all these vehicles upturned and rubble. And we were actually shooting at the old Sugar Puffs factory in Slough.
Nice.
And they managed to make it look like Kurdistan.
There you go. I mean, Slough, Kurdistan, it's not much different, is it?
No, I lied. Was it Slough? Southall. Sorry, there was another sequence we did at the Horlicks factory in Slough. Yeah, this was in Southall. Yeah,
class. So, Is there any, apart from obviously episode 5, we spoke before about that, about how we were kind of gushing over that episode, it is fantastic, but is there any other scenes in that show that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I don't want to, it's very easy to sound like, just boastful, like, oh yeah, we did a really good job, it is a team effort.
That's what you're here for.
I'm happy with a lot of the action in the show, and if I had to pick one fight as my favourite, it would be the fight at the end of episode 3, which is Elliot Chopay versus an assassin called Cole, played by Gordon Alexander. And that's the one where they're in this unfinished high-rise apartment and Cole has got these children captive. I'm happy with that because, well, for one thing, when we were in our action design period, I said to Gareth, who do you think is going to play this character Cole? Because obviously it's very important when you're choreographing to know who the actor is, what their physique is like, what their skill set might be. And Gareth said, I think Cole could be played by a stuntman. And I said, okay, well, actually, I know an actor who happens to be a world-class stuntman. And this is a guy called Gordon Alexander, and Gordon is a trained actor. He's done plenty of stage, he's done plenty of acting. Yeah. He's also was a competitive wushu performer, so he's got very high-level martial arts. And in his time as a stunt guy, he's doubled for Daniel Craig in Spectre. He's doubled Henry Cavill on Man from U.N.C.L.E. So he is a world-class stuntman. So I started choreographing that fight with Gordon in my head. And with the axe component was in the script. So we knew there was going to be a fire axe. So when we were in this very small mock-up of a bathroom, which was, cardboard boxes, I swung the axes, not in a kung fu way, but in a way that a performer who's done a lot of Chinese kung fu and weapons would be comfortable with, those grip changes, those subtle hand changes and footwork. I'm thinking Gordon will be able to nail this. And so I'm happy that I got to have two actors who are really good fight performers perform my choreography, so Chopay and Gordon. Yeah. I'm happy in that this is probably the most martial arty fight of the show. Yeah, because it's quite technical in some of the techniques we do. Not just with the axe, but the knife work, and then there's a couple of judo moves in there as well. A bit of leg takedowns and things like that. So the martial artist in me was quite indulged, and I was really happy with how Gareth shot it, or Matt ultimately operated camera, but how Gareth previewed it and edited it, and then how Matt captured it. I think it's probably my favourite fight scene that I've ever done. And I should say that Chopin does his fighting, but his stunt double Menz took some really nasty hits in that fight. So it's Menz that gets flipped over onto the washing machine in episode 1, and it's Menz getting kicked into the wall. It's Menz getting thrown into a wall in this episode 3. So yeah, I'm really quite happy with that fight. And then for sort of different reasons, if I had to pick another sequence that I'm happy with, it would be the fight scene in episode 8 where Luan, the Albanian, is in a hotel room with these Nigerian gangsters, and they're going to kill him. To be honest, I'm not in love with the fight. But why it means a lot to me was originally we had a much more ambitious fight planned and previous, and as the schedule went on, it became apparent that we were not going to be able to do that. And we were probably at best going to be given a day to shoot whatever we had. And this episode was being directed by Xavier Gain, a French director. And I remember I didn't have a lot of prep time with Xavier because he was prepping while I was working on a different block of filming. Yeah. But I remember sitting down with Xavier and his director of photography, and we talked about this fight scene. I think this is something that you should direct on a second unit. So the way we worked, and what I loved about Xavier, he's very collaborative. He's a very good director who knows what he wants in terms of his performances and his character art, but he's also not afraid to let somebody else do the business. Mm-hmm. So we talked about what would be in the fight scene. We talked about how it would end up with... I had this image of the camera being in the corridor of the hotel and the machete blade to just stab through the door and then stab 3 times, and then we'd come back into the room and the guy's up against the door. And Xavier was really on board with it. He told me what he wanted. He wanted to feel the animal come out of Luan. And then it was tough because on that one, literally I had about an hour and a half the day before shooting to choreograph and rehearse the fight with the stunt performers, including Luan's double. No time to do a previs. I literally just used a little pocket camera to frame what the shots were. And Xavier and Laurent came in, and I showed them the choreography, and I showed them what shots I had in mind, and Xavier was on board with it all. There was one extra shot that he wanted. He said, I want a shot, maybe in slow motion, maybe 90-degree shutter, where Luan pulls the blade out of a guy and there's blood in. But okay. And then he let me get on with it. And then the next day, I think we had less than 9 hours to shoot that whole fight sequence. Which was tough, you know. Yeah. But... And I'm really happy that extra shot that Xavier wanted me to get, we made sure we got it, and it made the trailer. And I said, this is what I would say is like the ideal action director relationship, is when they trust you to deliver the sequence that they want, and you go out of your way to try and give them what they want and what works for the scene. So I'm happy with it that within a very restricted amount of choreography time and prep time, we were able to make a sequence that some people have really, really responded to.
I'm glad you actually bring that one up, because that is genuinely, apart from the whole of episode 5, that is genuinely my favourite fight in the show.
Wow!
It is. I think like the rest of the fight sequences in the show, there's a lot of good stylized stuff that I absolutely love, but that was a character that towards the end of the series I really, really started feeling for, and I really kind of started towards the start of the show. I was like, I just cannot be bothered with this character. He's not doing anything I'm interested in, and then like you kind of just think he's a bit of a blanket, and then when he's got that machete against his throat and he just snaps straight away, I was just sitting watching it. I was like, yeah, that's nailed it.
I think Orly, who played Luan, is a real sort of undiscovered gem as an actor. And then I would say that all credit to Xavier that he's able to he really knows about character, and he knows about emotion and motivation, and he was able to get that. Just to give you sort of an idea of the sort of first unit, second unit sort of dynamic on that scene was on the main unit. It was Xavier directing, and I was there. We'd be blocked through the drama, you know, when the Chinese gentleman gets killed in the bathroom and all of that stuff. I was there for that. And right up till the close-up where Luan goes to grab the machete that's around his neck. Yeah. That's with Xavier. And then the fight sequence, right up to the three blades coming through the door, is second unit. And then when we pop back inside for Luan driving his thumbs through the eyes, we're back on first unit. So at that moment, I'm not an action director, I'm a stunt coordinator. Yeah. And Xavier is directing the actors and getting the emotion he needs. And I think he nailed it. And I think the way Orly playing Luan is all juiced up and like overdosed on adrenaline, and there's nothing heroic about it. He's doing this heavy hyperventilating breathing, and the way he walks out of that room and he's met by his wife. I can't take credit for any of that. That's all the actors, and that's Xavier. But I would hope that people watching the show wouldn't get the sense that there's two different directors at work.
No. Like but personally for me, it's sort of one of those moments that the character does exactly what I want him to do, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking he's not going to do this. which is it
was tricky, and also because of the time constraints, you know, Orly has doubled a heck of a lot in that fight sequence. Yeah. Because once again, I would love to have done a fight where we had a week to teach Orly the fight, but I didn't know the fight until the night before. You know, because I choreographed a certain amount of it in my head, but then you're in the space coming up with moves, and I'm saying, Chris, does that feel right? Yes, blah, blah, blah. But I knew that we're going to have to give a lot of this over to a stunt double to do. So very lucky I had James Stewart, who's a brilliant stunt performer. He was a good double for Orly. James has worked on shows like Game of Thrones, and James was able to pick up the choreography and do it, and then we use Orly for the bits where we want to see his face and we want to see the emotion. But this is the kind of thing where you cannot do a fight like that where you're fighting multiple opponents and do it with multiple cameras in a bunch of masters. It's just impossible. You have to break it up into shots. You know, and another thing I have to say just about that was camera operators are really important. And just like you were asking me about actors who can't fight, I genuinely believe some camera operators can't shoot action and some can. Yeah. And we were lucky on Apostle. Matt Flannery was the DOP, but the second cameraman was an operator called Paul Andrew. Well, Paul was the second operator for the stuff we shot in Wales on Gangs of London. Yeah. And on Gangs of London, we had an operator called Barney Crocker, and Barney picked up that style that Gareth, Matt, and I like. And when it came to shooting this fight sequence, I had to say to the production, I need Barney to shoot this. Don't just... Because they said, he'll be needed on main unit. And I said, no, hire another cameraman to go to main unit, and I need Barney. And I think the production, because people don't necessarily understand action, they probably thought, why is the stuntman being such a diva and insisting? And I said, please tell Xavier and Laurent, I would really appreciate if they can give me Barney that day, and they have another camera. And they, within 10 minutes, yes, they're absolutely fine, because Xavier and Laurent know they've done quite a bit of action. Yeah. And Barney's able to capture that energy and that style, and you know, I'm really grateful to him, because it was tough to pull out that kind of fight scene with so little time to prep and shoot. And I do like the fact that the audience seem to go, oh, Luan, you don't threaten that guy's family.
Well, exactly. I think it's because it's the one character you kind of least expect it. You know, like he's kind of, his wife's wearing the pants in that relationship. She's telling him what to do, and sort of he comes out with that to protect his wife and his children, and you're just sort of like, that is phenomenal. Just
in my head, that character's seen stuff in Albania.
Yeah,
He's experienced stuff. And it's funny, I didn't realize it at the time that months and months later, I was revisiting the Rambo films because I'm fond of 4 of them, and it was in anticipation of watching the latest one.
Yeah.
And I watched First Blood, and the sequence where Stallone's in the police station and the guy comes at him with a cutthroat razor and he flips.
Yeah. And
I realized that had informed how I blocked and choreographed that fight with Luan. But it wasn't deliberate. It was all in my subconscious. Yeah. And I remember I took a photo of a couple of things of the screen, and then I WhatsApped it to Xavier, the director, going, this reminds me of something. And I thought he might come back and go, how dare you plagiarize, you know? And he said, he found it really funny. He said, isn't it amazing what our mind draws on when we're under pressure? You know, and I do find that. I genuinely think as a choreographer or as a action designer, I haven't really got an original idea in my head. It's all been informed by thousands of action movies and TV shows and sequences.
Well, they do say that now it's hard to do anything original. Really, we all draw on something somewhere, so it's not anything to be ashamed of or anything. I mean, you've created something brilliant out of it. So,
thank you.
But now this one's a little bit of a point of contention, but the TV show has come out, and generally it's been praised by everyone. But there is a certain group of people, I like to call them whiny millennials, that feel the show is a little bit too out there and a little bit too gory. What do you make of that?
I might be very ignorant and unaware, but I don't know how much of a reaction there really is. I noticed like a certain tabloid newspaper will run stories about viewers being shocked by the level of violence, but that tabloid newspaper does kind of have form, previous form for creating content and creating stories that aren't there. I haven't felt like real outrage, because I think it would have been, delivered by, I think we would have heard more about it. I'm sure that, and I've seen on Twitter, some people going, this show's too violent for me, or I'm watching it through, my fingers, and, but I don't think there is like a big outrage, really. I could be wrong. I might be gauging this whole situation wrong, but
it wasn't a massive outrage. But I think when it first came out, there was certain people and everything like that, just sort of like. But my main answer to that, whenever somebody mentioned it to me or ever saw a post, I was kind of like, well, you kind of know what you're getting, as you said earlier. Like, it's Gareth Evans. If you've seen The Raid, you know what he's about. So it's kind of like. And then when the show begins, I feel the tone is instantly set, not just by the action or anything like that, but it's not, as you said before, a documentary. It's hyper-realistic.
But you're right. The opening sequence is a young lad hanging off the side of a building who gets set on fire. He's burned alive until the ropes burns through, and then he falls to his death. So I would imagine if you can get past the first sort of 3 minutes,
I think a lot of people
and if you can't, it's not for you. And I don't say that in an arrogant way. No. I would say if this show was being on the BBC, some outrage, I think, would be valid, because BBC is licence payers' money. But it's Sky and it's Cinemax money, and Sky is a subscription service. So I think it's the rules are slightly different if it's Sky Atlantic, and they're the same channel that showed Game of Thrones. And Game of Thrones wasn't just violence; it had, family members going to bed together and all kinds of cruel, all kinds of weird stuff. So, I would say that. I mean, I know that when we started choreographing on any project, I would say, what kind of rating would this be if it's in the cinema? We knew that we were doing something that was not to shy away from violence.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the brief. I think the Americans probably expected a certain amount of that within the action sequences. So that's why, when Elliot's fighting Len at the end of episode 1, I wanted Elliot to reach over and snap Len's finger and it just to be hanging off at a weird angle, because I thought on a lot of shows you wouldn't get away with doing that. And on this show we can, and also it's got the budget that we can actually take the time to do a shot like that, because when you're playing around with prosthetics and things, it takes time, and those are the sorts of little details that on a lower budget shoot just get dropped, But I think what people probably will find more troubling isn't the graphic violence, it's the atmosphere of sustained sort of cruelty like you see in episode 6 with the torture.
Yeah.
And I would say a lot of that is a testament to Xavier as a director and Michelle Fairley as an actor. And then the other actors, of course, the lady playing Tove, they're doing a great performance. But I think if you got as far as episode 6, you can't really complain about the violence.
Well, no, you've just seen a farmhouse getting blown to bits, so. So, this is a question that I never actually sent you, but I'd quite like to hear your opinion. And I feel like after speaking to you for a little while, I feel like I know where you're going to land on this. But for a long time now, there's been a debate on awards ceremonies and whatnot, like the Oscars, the BAFTAs, the Globes, and all that. That there should be a stunt category for stuntmen and choreographers and stuff. Do you think it's about time we had this?
I do, but unlike a lot of my peers, it's not something I feel strongly about or passionately about. I didn't get into this business to win awards or get recognition from the public or even from my peers. I enjoy the process of creating action. I really enjoy the choreography. I enjoy being on set, and I love seeing the end result if the end result is, resonates with an audience. So that's why I'm in it, and I'm very fortunate that I get paid to do that. But of course there should be Oscars for action design or for stunt coordination or for stunt teams and BAFTAs, because there's awards for pretty much every other area and department in the industry. So it's very strange that stunts aren't represented. And I think like the Emmys have a stunt category. So you kind of go, well, if they recognize it, I think they do like a stunt ensemble thing, It's like, if they recognize it, why not the Oscars and why not BAFTA? And I would say for BAFTA, it probably goes back to what I talked about earlier, is a bit of old-fashioned British snobbery.
God, yeah. It's a one that it's a topic that obviously it's been getting talked about for years. Because let's be honest, the bulk of American movies and a lot of British movies now as well, like they are action movies. They have a lot of action, so they should have a category there. But I think
not just that. Sorry to cut you off. Obviously, when you look at there's a category for sound design and there's a category for visual effects, and those movies that win the sound design or the visual effects might not be your typical Oscar fare. They might be an action picture. But if you look at the movies that win Best Picture over the last 20 or so years, a lot of them would not have been the films that they were without their action sequences. Yeah. And I'm just doing off the top of my head, Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, God, yeah.
Braveheart, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. What would those films have been without their action sequences, or if the action sequences hadn't been top level?
Yeah. Well, Crouching Tiger wouldn't have had a film.
Well, there you go. So I think it's kind of problematic to not acknowledge that, and then something people said, an observation, it's kind of glib, but I think it's valid, is that Tarantino can make a film about a Hollywood stuntman and that can get nominated, and Brad Pitt can win an award for playing a stuntman, So yeah, it's a bit bizarre, really. And I think certainly with the work that people like Chad Stahelski, David Leitch, Sam Hargrave that they're doing, I think you have to pay credit to some people. You know,
I think it's coming. It's long overdue, and it's coming. But I think, and I might be wrong, but I genuinely feel like Gangs of London has brought that to the forefront again, because there is and Extraction coming out, obviously, but we need to sort this out. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on it, and I felt like I already knew where you were going to land. So there's not really. We've already kind of dealt with episode 5, which I could probably gush about for days on. It was just it is such a great episode. Do you know? Because I've not seen yet, but I've not really actively checked yet. But do you know if we're getting a second series, because it's left kind of wide open?
I believe that there's a lot of people hoping that will happen.
Yeah.
And I just have to leave it there.
No. I'd just like to put you on the spot. But that's Gangs of London, and that's your illustrious career so far. You've done a great many number of projects. Do you have anything coming up in the pipeline that you can tell us about when the world goes back to normal, and sort of anything interesting that we can look out for?
Well, it's kind of funny because. On the intro, you mentioned 6 films a year and 100 something credits on IMDb, and I have to say that the reason why probably I'll have a lot of credits on some of those is if you're in this business for 25 years, 100 something credits really isn't that much. And when you're a stunt performer on some of those films, you may just work a day here and a day there, and you get a credit. So it's like, yeah, I've got a Star Wars film on my resume, but I only did a day or two, Most of 20, I'm trying to get my years right, most of 2019 and a lot of 2018 was spent on Gangs of London.
Yeah.
So that's been my main focus. And not long after, I actually lost track of all of the different jobs that I've done, but that was like the main job for most of the year was Gangs of London. And then when Gangs finished, I did a small little independent film called Barbarians, which was for a first-time feature director called Charles Dorfman, and it's quite different compared to Gangs because it's not an action film. It's a much smaller film, a tight budget, but it was an interesting script, and it was a director that I wanted to work with. And then after I finished that, I took a small break, and then started work on Havoc, which is Gareth's next film. And we've been designing action on that for, I think I said it feels like 12 weeks. And I'd say we're about 2/3 of the way through sort of choreographing the action in that. And nice. I can't say much about Havoc. There's a bit of information out there online, but I would say if you liked Gangs of London and or at least if you like the action in Gangs of London, I think you will love Havoc. I do genuinely think we've taken it to another level. Mm-hmm. And if you're the kind of person that didn't like Gangs of London's action sequences, you're not going to like Havoc.
I did see an interview that he did while he was doing press for Gangs of London, where he pretty much said that the Raid 3 isn't looking likely. Like he had an idea in his head for it, but it's not looking likely. Can you tell him from us that we just need it? We just want it. Like I'm a massive Raid fan, and I want him to make those movies for the rest of his life.
I think Gareth wants to make different kinds of movies.
Yeah, I totally understand.
I do genuinely think if we get to make Havoc with the sequences, with the kind of action that we're doing now, I don't think fans of the Raid will feel that they've been starved of quality fight and action sequences. And I'm not saying that in a boastful way. I'm just saying, stepping back and going, actually, this is, with Gangs of London, in the back of our head was always this thing of, it's a TV schedule, we might get 3 days to shoot this fight. that where I think we'll have a little bit more time to do some quite ambitious things.
Awesome. I'm always happy to hear that. And if our listeners wanted to check out any more about you or any more of your projects, where can they go to find out more about yourself?
There's basically look for Real Power Stunts. That's one word, REEL, and then Power Stunts. I'm on Instagram. There's a Real Power Stunts Facebook page. There's a Twitter, and there's a website that's probably the last place you should look. I think the Facebook and the Instagram are probably better for updates and so on.
Yeah, awesome. And anything that we see that you're cropping up in, or that I see that you hear from you in, I'll try and push out as much as possible and everything. And this has been a genuine pleasure. This has been a pleasure speaking to you, because Gangs of London took me by surprise. I can't believe I was going to do week to week. But I was lucky that everybody started raving about episode 5, so I got Now TV on the go.
It's funny. I actually said to Gareth, I feel jealous that person who turns on the TV and just comes across episode 5 knowing nothing about it.
It's like you said earlier as well, that episode could literally be its own little movie if it wanted to be. It's just... The storytelling is brilliant. Like you said, you don't need to have seen the episodes before. You definitely don't need to have seen the episodes after. It's just a fantastic little episode to itself. And I knew there was something coming, because obviously, like, when it comes up directed by, and I hadn't seen Gareth Evans' name for 3 episodes, I think it was, because he did the first one and he didn't do 2, 3, and 4. 5 comes on and I'm like, directed by Gareth Evans? Here we go. This is going to be something. And I love the slow burn. I love that. The scene when the father is in the pub, in the toilet, and the guy's on the other side of the door. Oh, yeah, that's...
I really do think Gareth is a master of tension.
Yeah.
When we did the fight in episode 1 at the end in the Doss house with Len, the guy with the butcher knife, he obviously had an edit of that fight really quickly. Mm-hmm. And when we were doing other things, like when we were on set or when we previs, sometimes, he would say to me, "Oh, do you want to show the stunt guys any of the action that you've done?" Because some of the stunt guys hadn't worked on the show up to that point.
Yeah.
And he would show them that fight, but he would start it from when Elliot enters the building. And it would be like a minute or two of Chopay going through corridors and things. And I used to think, just get to the fight, people want us in the fight. And then when we had the cast and crew screening, for the whole episode 1. That was my first time sitting down and watching the whole thing from the beginning. And I realized in Gareth's head, that action sequence doesn't begin when the fight begins. It begins when Elliot gets a text message telling him to go to that place. Yeah. And Gareth is just ratcheting up the tension from that moment. And that's really something that I think he's a master of. And it's like, I can choreograph a fight sequence on my team, and I can put together a fight sequence like that one with the butcher. Mm-hmm. But then Gareth is the master of like turning it into something and elevating it.
Well, I'm going to let you go now, because I've taken up about 2 or 3 hours of your time here. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. I could probably have done another 2 or 3 hours, but when I saw Gangs of London, I had to get you on and speak to you. Spencer spoke very highly of you and said that, if there's anybody you're going to speak to from that show, speak to Jude. So it was great.
That's very kind of him, and he was an important person to have on set when we were doing episode 5. He made our Danish mercenaries look like they perhaps knew what they were doing.
Oh, they did as well. I mean, with that, that whole episode, I probably could have just done a 2-hour episode talking to you about that, to be honest. But I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go now. This has been absolutely fantastic. It's nice to get, one of your type of role, the stunt guys, the stunt choreographers. We've not had that on this show before. We've had directors, producers, actors, but it's really good to get your role on here as well and speak to a stunt choreographer, especially one that's got such a great CV behind them so far. And I look
Thank
forward.
you so much.
I look forward to seeing what you have coming out and coming up, and I'll be keeping an eye out.
Thanks, Kev. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll get you back to your regularly scheduled podcast in just a minute. But we wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm Jason.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Blake on this highly produced advertisement.
That's right. It's the History of Bad Ideas, a.k.a. Hobie. You can find us on Twitter at Bad Ideas Podcast and on Facebook at the History of Bad Ideas. But if you like a podcast roundtable with 3 to 5 guests, usually every week, depending on sick leave, talking about all things geek, including movies, TV,
I ain't getting paid for this shit.
Blake bitching about something and ranting, and comic books and anything else that we can think of. We have a top 5 list every week, along with a box office news, and somehow we have listeners, so they send us some feedback we answer every week. You can find us on iTunes,
Stitcher,
Facebook,
Spotify,
and any good podcast app, because if you can't find us on that podcast app, it's not a good podcast app.
Damn straight. Roger says goodbye.
Goodbye.
So that was Jude, and from the absolute bottom of my heart, I'm so proud of this interview. It's one of my favourites. It's definitely one of my favourites. It's completely different to what we normally do. Actors, directors, producers, just getting a stunt choreographer, stunt coordinator, martial arts expert, just getting someone like Jude on has been fantastic. I have absolutely loved doing this. The indie talks have really taken on. They've come on leaps and bounds, and just speaking to a man who is as good as he is at what he does and has done as much in his career as he has, it's just fantastic. I mean, there's movies that he worked on that we didn't really talk about too much because he didn't do a great deal on it, but they're movies that you would know straight away, and just the fact that he even did a day on these things is incredible. So yeah, coming up, we've got some more indie talks coming up. Chris and I will be back on the main show. I've got a couple more indie talks that I've done myself, a few more in the pipeline already working on. Michael Elkin, you may have heard me mention him at some point, probably when I finished off the Spencer Collins episode. His movie Break, sort of a crime caper set around the world of snooker with Sam Gittins and the legend that was Rutger Hauer in his final movie performance. That interview is incoming. I really enjoyed talking to Michael. Proper down-to-earth director, someone you can really get behind. And when Break comes out, because the whole pandemic kind of slowed things down there, when that movie comes out, we're going to be pushing it to the heavens. We cannot wait to see this movie, and I think you're going to enjoy this interview as well. He's had a cracking little open conversation we had about his varied life, which was cool. I really enjoyed it. I've loved listening back to it. The Shakespeare Sisters, I know what you're thinking. Stay with me. No, not them. The Shakespeare Sisters are a couple of directors. It's a sister duo, obviously by the name. Anna and Hilary Shakespeare came on to the show with friend of the show, Dom Lenoir. He came on as well, producer. Their little movie, Soundtrack to 16, which I reviewed on the show a little while ago on the main show. I absolutely loved Soundtrack to 16, so getting them on was a no-brainer for me. Couldn't wait to speak to them. We had such a good time cracking. It was a really nice chat, actually. It was those ladies are fantastic, and another couple of directors that I'm 100% going to be keeping an eye on, because I loved Soundtrack, and they talked about their next feature, which is Much Ado, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go from there. And obviously Dom's doing his thing. He's absolutely crushing it right now. He's doing fantastic. They make your film seminars and things like that, and obviously he's got his own movies in the works. So yeah, it was great to have those three on. I absolutely loved doing that episode. And an episode that I've not yet recorded, but it is incoming, Mr. Paul Biddis, who is literally the top of his field in military advising. And again, another different one for me, military advisor. I've not really had that. I suppose Spencer does military advising and stunt coordination as well. But this is the guy that Spencer looks up to, so I'm super looking forward to getting Paul Biddis on. He's got a great group of movies that he's worked on, and some of them absolutely huge blockbusters. So we're going to be diving into them. I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be a cracking episode as well. And yeah, there's more. There's, believe it or not, that's another 3 episodes incoming that I've just dropped. But believe it or not, there's more. There's a lot more, which is scary. But we will get into all them. You will hear them. You will see them when they're coming along. For now, this was Jude Poyer. I absolutely adored talking to him, and I beseech you, good sir, to go out and find his projects, find more things that he's done, watch them, and see his coordination, his choreography up on the screen. I mean, you don't have to look any further than Gangs of London. He did a ton of work on that show, and it is phenomenal. He mentions a few times about working with Gareth Evans again for Gareth Evans' next movie, Havoc. Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be awesome. So with that, I'm going to bug out, and I'm going to let you go. And please do come back for the next Indie Talk, for the next main show. Come back for it all. We're going to keep doing it.